Hello there, and welcome to my little arty corner of YouTube. It's Tuesday the 22nd of March. It's a gloriously sunny day outside. Spring has sprung yet again. It's been lovely. Yesterday was really grey and not so good, but today is lovely. And what am I doing? I'm indoors arting because that's what I need to do. But no matter, the sun is shining, the sun is coming in through my windows, and all is, well, it's not well in the world, but it's well in my little space for a while, for a short while. So thank you for joining me. Thank you if you've subscribed to my channel. I greatly appreciate it, as I do the likes for videos and all the lovely comments I'm getting at the moment. So thank you so much. Keeps me on the straight path and stops me veering off too wildly into regions that maybe appeal to me but perhaps not to others, who knows. So yesterday I did this page here in my sketchbook where I added this lovely floral pattern called Blomkool by Makey Terpstra, a CZT I think from the Netherlands, with some variations, and it was really lovely. And I did add microglaze to the top of some of these to try to bring the colours out because they were looking a bit dusty and a lot more muted than I would like. Maybe a function of the paper underneath, maybe a function of the distress ink, may just be me. And it didn't work too well on camera, but off camera I used my little finger, well actually my index finger, and used quite a bit more of the microglaze, and it actually brought out the colours, especially when I buffed it with a clean cloth. I didn't do these, but this one is a comparable colour. I think I did do that one. It's hard to tell now, actually. I think perhaps maybe it's because this paper is so absorbent, it just soaks it up without leaving that fine layer on the surface. Interesting. Anyway, I have another page. Yeah, I spent some time yesterday just drawing a border along the edge. I quite like this idea that I've been doing. I didn't do it on camera. It's Huggins. I think I've tackled Huggins or variations of it in a previous video. I may be wrong. If you want to see how I draw this and some variations, leave a comment below. Okay, so what I thought I'd do today, something, it is a little bit different, but I think these are things that I can draw an inspiration to create more botanical motifs. And these are microscopic life and cells and things that, you know, things you would see under a microscope, some of which are a bit strange because I like strange, if you haven't guessed. And also I'm a scientist, so, you know, I'm going to be fascinated by things like that. I'm not just a scientist. We are all many things, but science is one of those things under my belt. Excuse me. Oh, it's that season of the year. Tree pollen, allergies. So one thing I thought that was quite interesting, I've just looked over at, excuse me while I just adjust my book to make it a bit easier. And yeah, we've got a bit of light streaming in over here. I'm afraid the light is what it's going to be. My window next to me, to my left, to this side, is south facing. So as the sun moves around in the morning and afternoon, the light changes in my room. But I much prefer working here than to a north-facing room, which is a bit dark and dismal. So I cope with the sunlight, even if I have to block some of it out. There's enough that comes in through chinks and cracks and other windows that lightens my mood. Anyway, I just spotted this one. I thought, oh, this is fun. So this is the shape I'm going to start with. But inside are little shapes like that, and that, to go from that to say perhaps something like this, where I'm going to put the petals around the outside first, and then I can add others to each side, perhaps put the central one in next, and then have the next ones hidden underneath. And I've created a flower with an unusual top. I quite like this. That's a bit fun. So let me have a look again at that one. can draw inspiration from all kinds of things. So what about if I pop something similar around the edge and perhaps keep on going this way, as if we've got it overlapped, and then perhaps do some, I'm not quite sure how this is going to end up, because my skills this morning at making my pen go where I want them to aren't exactly wonderful. I know it's interesting, but perhaps not so good, but then it may need something else to just start it off. I'm going to put a stem on there. The stem doesn't really work on that one, so I think before I pick up a different size pen, let's just draw it without the stem again. There's just something lovely about that. I actually think that perhaps if I'd popped just a simple thing like that around, and perhaps to hide that I didn't want that stem there in the first place, let's put some lines like this around, and then that looks a bit better. This one is a bit strange here, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a finer pen, because I know I will make less of a mess joining this up, and perhaps adding lines in to suggest that these further petals are perhaps bending over, and just to help, I don't know, to give it some kind of structure and purpose. Like so. That actually looks better, and part of me thinks perhaps I should do the same here and have this one like a bit like that. Now then, that has now got me thinking to how I can improve that, so let's improve it this way, and I'm going to pop those like that, and then I'm going to pop that second ring around the original one, and then perhaps have my other petals growing off there, and perhaps have them disappearing behind, because that would make perhaps a little bit more sense. I don't know, maybe, but that kind of works. I've picked up a bit of fluff. It's for my pen. I think I've got it off, possibly. So that's quite an interesting idea, perhaps. And of course I could pop another row of these behind that one so they meet this inside ring. Actually, that works quite nicely, so let me develop this a bit more. Instead of drawing the full shape, this full oval shape here, let's draw part of it. Join that bit on, join those two ends together with the wavy line. Then we can go back and draw some underneath perhaps, and some behind, and let's grow it up. I am going to pop, all got a bit close together on that side. I'm discovering this sketchbook was a brilliant idea in that it's got tons of paper in, will last me ages, but it's such a pain for me to draw on the edges unless I turn the page upside down or at weird angles so I can rest my hand on there. I really need something underneath here that I can rest my hand on at a height that's closer to this. Okay, so here I can pop perhaps some other petals in. I'm just going to give these ones raggedy edges. Don't want to get too close to my border though. Perhaps one last one there. Maybe one last one there. There we go. So there's a different one again. So that was really, so from this, which looks a bit awkward, let me move this down. I keep forgetting to check whether everything's on camera or not. There we go, that is now. So I move things further and further away from me. So I started with this shape, which is a kind of a sort of like a rod with rounded ends with some little arches, you know, like little lumps and bumps in the middle, to this, which is making something of it as if there's petals beginning to open in the middle, to this one, which again still looks a bit awkward, but I think has got some mileage in it, especially if we perhaps join those to the ends. And perhaps the same here, perhaps if we join that there, it doesn't feel quite so awkward, maybe. To this one, which looks less awkward than this, it feels that we've got some petals growing here, although not very successfully in some ways. And I'm thinking, as I'm doing this, perhaps to have some petals growing inwards from the outside behind them, maybe. That feels a bit better, but that ring still sticks out a bit like a sore thumb there. So to this one I quite like. I like this one. This one feels awkward to me. This one feels a bit awkward. That one, well, yeah. This one now is beginning to have some feeling of, yeah, that feels a bit more as I'd like it to be. And this one is, yeah, I like this one. I like this centre. It reminds me of medieval flowers, which I drew a little while ago, and but a different way to get to them. So I'm going to carry on working with this C shape for a moment and to see if I can do something about these perhaps. I'm not entirely sure how though. Let's have a look and see how it works. So we'll do that, and then I will have these growing out almost like they are seriously growing out from inside, and I could even then pop a couple more at the top as if they're getting narrower as they grow out. And this one perhaps we can add something that feels like there's one on the edge. Okay, so I am going to pop that border, that ring in, because that single line really does feel like it's an accident, whereas when I do this it feels more deliberate. And then perhaps I can go with some of these shapes, and I am curving the petals just that little bit. We have a little tiny one there, which is fine, and then perhaps just some just a tuck behind there. And that I like that one, which is similar in some ways to this, but it's got more exuberance. This one's a lot more structured. And this one then, I could get the same effect if I go perhaps like so. So these are actually all inside that section. That works. That works. So let me go back and have a look at this here. And let's see if we can get these. They look like there's a centre here that is, and it may be that I'm going to have to just thicken this line here, and it may be that I just have to perhaps go around like that and maybe just split this up, just as to give me that sort of feeling that there's a ring around here. It's a bit clumsy, but it's a sketchbook, and I think that works then when we fill these in, and I think that would be the case here perhaps. I like using both, because this one started life as this shape, as did that one, and as did this one, and these ones, or this one as well, but these ones started with that C shape that we started with some feathers, you know, petals in. So that's nice if I start with the bottom edge. So let's try that one. So let's draw the bottom row of petals in here. And I am varying their height. And what I'm trying to do is here, or what is happening is, I'm making them sort of like bend towards like almost a vanishing point or a point at the top. And then what I'm going to do here, so I'm going to pop that around, and then I'm going to do something a bit different. Instead of turning it into a flower, let's turn it into a pod or a capsule. You know I love my seed pods and capsules if you've been watching me long enough. So that works nicely as well. So we've got almost like a flower emerging from its casing, the sepals that enclose it, except it's not really sepals, we've really got a seed pod going on here. Just going to do that. That's really quite nice, I like that. Okay, so let's have a look at that idea again. Let's do this, and perhaps this time I'll do a row of small petals, sort of like pointing in towards this, you know, folding over towards the centre. I'm kind of imagining that there's like I suppose a globe or a dome here, and they're folding their way over it. But then perhaps with the next row we can do some very big ones, like so, and perhaps with some more pointing out behind, and that then has that feeling of, I like that. That really is like something's emerging and growing out. So let's have a look at what we could put underneath. Do you know what that reminds me of? It's the buds you see on chrysanthemums. When, you know, they sometimes seem to be that instead of being round, they're sort of like squashed. And that's what this reminds me of. I'm not saying I had chrysanthemums in mind when I was drawing this, but that's just what it reminds me of. It's not exactly like a chrysanthemum, but it's similar, I suppose. So have a stem in, because you've got to have a stem really, and that's a really nice stem. Well, I think it is. I like that shape at the top and how it sort of like echoes this, but those lines aren't they aren't close together. These have been quite shallow C shapes. So let's have a look at something that perhaps has a deeper C to it, and see how we can get this to work with these kinds of ideas. So first job, I'm going to pop petals around, and then I think I might just pop that in to begin with. And then here, if we carried this on, we'd have those, but I need something coming out that will perhaps fill that space in. So that actually works quite nicely, I think. Possibly. Don't know for sure. Just start that up. Almost like ginkgo leaves. I love ginkgo leaves. So how am I going to start this as a kind of seed pod? So if I take the lines from about halfway down, got the sides fairly straight here, which will work, I think, this time for me. And let's have a look at making another different kind of connection for us. For a stem. This feels awkward. It feels like this is leaning forward and this is leaning back, but it's just getting ideas down and seeing how things work. So for this one, I think I'm going to do just some shapes like this. There's pattern on there. That one, I do like that one actually. It's a bit strange. It's that sense of perspective, but that can be worked on at a later date. In a sketchbook, I'm beginning to get to grips with this idea. It's a place to get ideas down and for things to work on in the future. Or not. It's just practicing imagination, creativity. And yeah, you make mistakes. I mean, some of these ones here are pretty grim, but I've done things to them that have improved them. But it's like I've improved all the way along. This one is a bit strange, but I'm happy with that. So what about, this was quite deep. So how about if we make it really shallow? And with this one, I am going to have plenty of things growing out of the top, I think. But I'm going to make them strange shapes. As if these are seeds themselves, I suppose. Oh, look. This reminds me a little bit of yesterday's pattern. A little bit, but not entirely. Having those frilly bits around the liner, I think I'll do that. So it's a bit like this, only a bit. I've got the stems coming up, but instead of having the stems joining in this spoke pattern, I've turned them into almost like seed pods. And I'm going to take my finer pen here, and I am going to create some interest in the sides and edges, perhaps, like so. Just do that. That is an interesting kind of idea. I'm going to work with this a bit more now. Perhaps put a couple more in behind. There's nothing lovelier than having an abundance of stuff shooting out of a pod, I suppose. Just this simple addition of these little shapes in the middle just creates that sense of dimension or of interest, of, you know, it's that those little details can add so much, I think, to a design. So I've got here my a pencil, and what I'm going to do is I am going to draw very lightly the shape that I want to follow here, because what I want to do is create some rigidy parts to this seed pod, so it looks a bit like a flower pot now. I'm almost tempted to put like a foot there, but I won't. I think I might use this idea again of having that as the stem. It's like the stem's growing up there. This would actually be darker, so I'm just going to pop some lines there to suggest we've got a hole there. It looks a bit like an upside down beehive as well. But that was fun. How did I get to this from that? You've seen the video. It's just going with what becomes apparent as you draw things and just try things out. I eventually got to the point where I realized that this essentially is two C's put together. So if I take half the C shape, and I could continue to do this, is that I could just have this and have that there, as if there's a ridge across the top of the seed pod, because that actually works quite nicely. That does actually. Just simple, simple, simple. And I suppose we could have it going to the edge as well. That could be an interesting one to do. Just have it around the back so that the seed pod itself is kind of, well, no, the top isn't hidden, it's just the inner ring, I suppose, is. Just take those down there, and then I can just bring that around. So that works nicely. And again, let's give it a broad bottom, just for fun. Not sure how well that would work, but who's to say you can't have seed pods like that. The other thing I think I'd want to do is just extend these lines just a little bit. And I think that would work with this as well, as if we just make these little lines between the arches just a little bit longer. I'm beginning to get a very alien, you know, sort of like an off-worldly, another worldly garden appearing on my page, or specimens from it. Okay, so what if we use that a C again, but quite a squarish one? And let's add things in here that perhaps, I say things, how about if we add just one in here? So let's pop something like that in, and perhaps have this. I think I could have fitted a couple more in, so let's try that one again. I'm going to move my page so you can see it. So let me try this. So I'm going to pop one in, leaving a little bit of space at the edge, and then perhaps another, and perhaps another like that. And let's just get that space going. I'm going to fill that little corner in there like I did that corner, and then we've got space to pop other things on the top. So I'm going to put what looks like little leaves there, and then if that would work, this one would work, but I think it needs a little bit of work, perhaps making it a bit more plumptious at the edge, which I think I could do just by extending lines and perhaps giving it a almost like a neck, and just fill those in. Yeah, I made a bit of a mess of it, so I think I'll leave it like that. They look almost like chicken wings. Oh no, chicken legs. Is it? Drumsticks. Is it? Is that what you call them? I'm vegetarian. I've been vegetarian most of my life. I'm well into my 50s. In fact, I'm rapidly approaching 60 in a year and a bit, you know, a year and a half, I suppose. And I think I first turned vegetarian when I was 13. And in the intervening years, I think there have been a handful of years where I may have eaten meat because it was almost forced upon me, or I was forced to by pressure from people who found me an embarrassment. or difficult because I didn't eat meat or fish or shellfish. And when I was vegan, oh my goodness. Although the Heritage Railway I was involved in, I made the most delicious vegan muffins, blueberry muffins or chocolate muffins or cherry and coconut. And the chaps there couldn't get enough of them, even though they were vegan. Right, so I cannot have these things look at all like chicken. I was so tempted to put little dots on them, but I'm not. I'm going to add some borders, and then inside them I am going to turn them into seed pods, hopefully. Like so. There we are, my chicken drumstick seed pod plant. That's gross. I've got to try and erase that from my mind. But you know, you never know what's going to come out of your pen. So that one was quite square. So what if I have it so we have a distinct dip at the bottom, but it would roughly be, I'm going to put a circular pod around this, and then perhaps have some almost tentacular shapes. Like a sea anemone. You can have as many as you like, can't you? Going off in all kinds of directions. The fun thing about ones like this. Have I strayed too far away from the original idea? I don't think so. The original pattern up here was a starting point, which was basically this oval shape with something inside. If you look, I've still got that shape there, but instead of low, little arches, I've kind of extended them into long, thin things. Here, these arches have become weird shapes. Perhaps I'll help this idea change if I do something like that. Oh, that's better. Perhaps. You'll never get that idea out of your head, though. I'll forget about it, hopefully. So this one is quite nice, and I'll just put a simple stem there. And I think for this, it might be nice just to pop some patterns like this in, maybe. Got space for perhaps, well, an easy space for me to draw in left. So let me have a look at how I could change this again. This one was more rounded at the top, so what about if I do something that's distinctly V-shaped? And I'm going to draw the bottom in before I do anything in the top. Pac-Man. What was that noise it made? I'm sure somebody will tell me. So perhaps with this one, I'm going to put in some shapes that are perhaps like spiky leaves, or they could be seed pods, because if I popped a dot on them, perhaps that becomes believable, or questions whether it's, a flower, or although you have petals with dots on. Sure about single dots, mind you. And there at the end of this one, I've use that kind of shape for the end shape there, little triangular shape. And then perhaps around the edge here, I'm just going to pop some of these little round shapes. This one does look like it's in a flower trough, doesn't it? Looks like it's a, you know, it's something like a weird onion that's been planted ready to grow. So let's give it a stem and suggest that it's a plant of some kind. There we go. And if I do something with this around here, perhaps. That's okay, I suppose. Except I've messed up the spacing, so let's just go and fill it all in. How about that then? It's not bad, is it? 36 minutes the video is here. I must probably spent 5 minutes waffling about nothing much, but I eventually got here. Now I could add colour to this, and it would, I'm just tidying up some space while I consider what I'm going to do. And I could add pattern and texture. So let's have a look at pattern and texture. I'm just getting some, I got some fine liners here. Now these are water soluble, they're the Staedtler Triplus. I don't have any fine liners that are permanent, and I don't know if there is such a thing, or ones that are in, you know, nice colours that aren't bright and in your face. So I'm going to add some details, perhaps with a couple of different colours. This is a kind of mossy green. I'm rather fond of this colour, and I'm going to have to try and find out if Staedtler do open stock. Nice if they did, if I could just get this one or a couple of colours, because buying the multi-packs, and I think this colour only comes in the larger multi-packs, is a bit of a pain when most of the colours I'm never going to use. So that's quite nice. Okay, let's have a look here. And I think what I'm going to do with a couple of these is I'm going to add my go-to Shattuck, filling spaces in like this. I just love how quick and easy it is, but how it looks more complicated than it is, doesn't it? It's a lovely texture. And I do enjoy textural patterns like that. So that's quite nice. I'm looking for somewhere else. Let me have a look. Where else? I've run out of space for perks. I haven't got any perky perk space. Oh, shucks. Okay, I'm going to use this just to pop some colour at the bottom here. Like so. So that's fun. Okay. I do have somewhere. Not in there, so it's going to be, bear with me a moment, because I know that I've got, not in there, this one perhaps, yeah. My brown micron pen, because I do love a micron. So let's just do something with some of these to add interest. So with this one, I'm just adding some little loops inside the petals, and that will help differentiate them from whatever is growing up in the middle of everything else. This is interesting. My pen has suddenly decided that it doesn't want to work on this paper. So what's happened to my Micron pen, don't tell me it's given up the ghost. But blimey heck, it has. It's dried up completely. What a... It was fine the other day and I've barely used it. Okay, different one. This is I've got some Tombow Fudennosuke pens that are coloured, and this is the brown one. It's not as reddish brown as the Micron, but it'll do. So I'm just adding some shadows here with this and some highlight as well there. I think I could most probably get away with adding some things here like that. Not happy, bunny. No, not happy. That's upset me. Oh, I say upset me. That has not upset me, but it's concerned me that after such little use, with the cap on, being kept flat and everything, it's decided not to work. So we got this one, Staedtler Triplus. It's a redder colour. It means then that if I want to add shadow, well, I can use it's much more of a red brown, this one is, which I really do like. I can use water. This will move. In fact, I've done this in the past where I've used water to move the colour a little bit, but you get you can get an echo if you're careful of the line that you've put in, as well as a soft layer of colour in there. So I might show that on one of these. So if I add this to one that I'm not too worried about if I make a mess of, I'm not too worried about making a mess of any of them, to be honest, but as I'm quite happy with the ones that to my right, then I'd be quite happy to have them remain as they are until I'm sure I like the effect I get. So I'm just adding a little bit of the green at the bottom of each of these, like so. And then in here, nope, not that, pencil cases. Rattle, rattle, rattle. Apologies for rattling, rattling, rattling. Oh God, I can't see it. I know I've got a water brush in here. I have. So here is my water brush. Just checking how wet the bristles are, because I don't want them too wet for this. If you use just a damp brush, you can pick up enough colour from this that you can use it a bit like a paint. You can use it just to tint the area around it. The line will soften and feather a bit, but I think that adds then to the texture and the appeal in my case anyway. It may not be everybody's cup of tea. And this isn't something I do often, but as an alternative to using another colour to add shadow and highlight, I think I'll stick with doing it this way. So that just helps to add that extra bit of colour in. Can I do it with that one? No, I can't, because yes I can. It wasn't the Micron. Microns are waterproof. This one isn't. And I can spread this colour out just a little bit, and then that pattern remains, but I've added that hint of colour, which is quite nice, and the texture. And if I just need a little bit more water running, because the brush was getting a bit dry. Then if you're careful, you can just, at the edges, use that just to introduce a bit more colour to add that shadow in. So it's by spreading the colour out and leaving it intense in the middle, I think. Perhaps not such a good idea, but getting there. These ones, I'm just going to run down the lines so that these will spread, the colour will spread out to either side but leave some lighter areas in between. That's what I could have done with doing here, I think. So we're getting the highlights by not dampening paper. And at the back they can all go brownish because they then look like they're behind. That actually is really quite nice. Have a look if I can just move a bit of the colour along the edge to add the shadow here. Maybe. Just a bit, and then no, because those won't work because I did them in the Fudanasuki, didn't I? So some different ways perhaps to add some colour. Let me have a look there. Colour and texture. This is something I'll be trying with lettering when I practice my lettering later on perhaps. So that's quite fun. All the other greens are so bright in this set. They really are. Don't like the darker greens. This one may be all right because it's a, oh gosh, perhaps not. It's so vivid. I don't know when it happened that I suddenly worked out that I prefer less vivid colours often, more vintagey feeling. I don't know. Don't get me wrong, I still like bright colours, but so there I've put those in the edge and use the water brush to move the colour around. So perhaps I can do that with these where I want them to be darkest. Just put some colour down, not worrying too much about how even it is, perhaps, because hopefully the water will move it. And let's see how this works. A bit more water perhaps, slightly damper brush. Don't want to flood it because this, I want to keep some darkness there, but I still want to use it to just tint these individual whatevers are growing out here. Petals, flower, tops of seeds that are about to take wing and fly, or perhaps alien hands, because they do look like three-handed fingers each one, three-fingered hands even. So there's that. And then just realised there was one bit that I didn't add any to, but it's fine as long as it gets some colour, because not all of the colour will move. Just realised perhaps I do need a bit neater in adding the colour, but you can move it, and perhaps I can just add some in there, some there into the wet, and then just use the damp brush just to see if that works. As does this. So another way of adding colour. Use your stash. It's the message, I think. Actually, I think adding water first before I add this, it stops it from drying too quickly. So let's have a look and see how. It does pull a lot more colour out of the pen, but I'm happy with that because that then means I've got more colour to pull out. And yeah, there'll be places where perhaps it's uneven and, you know, a bit on the not quite so smooth and lovely kinds of side, but I'm okay with that. Just going to add some water on this side so I can just add some colour around the edges and around the bottom as well. I want the bottom to be darker because that would be in shadow. And I've just gone outside the space of this seed pod there, but I'm not too worried. Sketchbook. That'll be my shout every time I do this in here. Sketchbook. And as it's water soluble. Oh, I do this every time, don't I? I think I can use my finger to clean it up. And that never works, but it's okay because if I add a bit around the outside of it all, it then looks deliberate, doesn't it? So there we are. Playing with things. Actually, let's go and play with, I say play, use a different colour. So I'm just going to add water to the tips of these tentaculars. Where does that word come from? Is it such a word? It doesn't, I don't know. Oh, venomous tentacular, Harry Potter. There we go. So let's give this one pink tentacles at the top anyway. Hopefully we won't have so much towards the bottom and I can add another colour in, but we'll see. Trying to smooth the ends out and make them look that colour out. Gosh, that's in your face bright, isn't it? Like, okay, and then at the bottom, let me pop some blue perhaps. I was going to put green, but I think blue might actually work better. I could be wrong, of course, but what's the worst that's going to happen? I say this often, the worst that happens is you don't like what you've produced, but you learn from it. And it's always easy to redraw something that you've already drawn. It's not like you have to remember what to do, because you've got the guide there for it. Actually, that works quite nicely. I'm quite chuffed with that. It's not as smooth perhaps as I would like, but it's certainly something to work with these things. And again, it's sort of like with these, I could pop a spot of this in the centre. And then quickly, hopefully before it dries, it's going to be quite, because it can be a pain to do one and then come back and do all the others. But I'm going to leave the water soak in a moment. Perhaps use a bit more water just to move that dot out a bit more, maybe. Oh, come on. I do like these Caran d'Ache water pens. They've got pistons on them, and the bit that you press to release more water is quite stiff, so you do have some control over it. You may not have as much control as you would like, but you do have some control, and a bit more control than others perhaps. So with this one I'm going to pop this red brown all around the edge, like so. Need to get rid of the idea that they may be chicken legs, because that is bugging me now. And what colour am I doing them? A red brown. Yeah. Quite a lot of water in here, so there's going to be areas that aren't quite as intense as others. So let me give a different colour at the end. try orange. And what I'm going to do with these is I am going to wet them before I pop the orange in, because I think that's the better way to work if you want a more smooth, I suppose, colour spread, because the water that's already there will allow the colour to sort of like spread out through it, a bit like chromatography. Chromatography was one of those experiments that was endlessly fascinating. It used to be used in forensic science to identify whether different inks have been used to, say, sign a cheque in forgeries. So when you do chromatography, you use a solvent just as simple as water or other liquid, and it's the simplest way is you put a dot of the ink on a piece of chromatography paper, which is like filter paper, coffee filter paper, but really, really fine quality. And you put that on one end, you put just the tip of that paper in the solvent and allow it to rise up the paper, and as it rises up, the colours separate out. And chromatography literally means coloured writing or coloured picture. And so you'd see what colour dyes were used in that particular ink. And if that didn't match with the part of the cheque, say, that you thought something had been forged, then it had been changed by another pen. And so then you have to work out, okay, whose pen was that one? And inks are quite common, but if one person used one pen to sign their cheques always, or they signed the cheque and somebody went to the bank and signed it with a different pen at the bank, or changed it at the bank before they paid it into their account or whatever, then you'd be able to detect that a different pen had been used for that. So these don't seem to have different colours, although they could have. It's hard to tell because they're in tiny spaces, but a different way to make use of your supplies. So I hope that you found that interesting and fun, and that I've given you a bit of confidence here as to how you can alter, how you work from one simple shape like this and work your way through to others, and come up with something that doesn't look like what you started with, but you're using those same ideas. Sort of like this curved shape with something in the middle. All of them have got a curved shape with something in the middle. And sometimes the back of that shape disappears. Sometimes you can see it going round, and occasionally it's still there. Like this one and this one. And there's so many ways of working. And sometimes you end up with chicken leg plants. It sounds like chicken egg plants, but it's not, you know what I mean. So, weird and wonderful, my brain. Possibly wonderful, I'm not quite sure. Weird, definitely. So I'm just going to say thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a go at drawing some of these and creating your own variations. Whether you take something like this one and create something different coming out the top, or closing it in, or creating it into a proper seed pod, have a go. As you can see, the worst that you do is you go, I got things that look like chicken drumsticks and I'm a vegetarian, and that'll stick in my head forever. So, or as I did right at the beginning over here, we had ones that I wasn't keen on, but as I developed through, I went back and altered them so I can see how I can make them something I'm more comfortable with. This one I still haven't managed it. It's that harsh line that's there, but I would want to put something in there like a double ring, or not having these line up perhaps might help, and having more of a, pen, that'll do. Instead of having this straight line, perhaps having more of a curved line there, so it looks like these are growing out from up and over. So you can change the shape of these, so they look like they are coming up and over and out from the centre, as it were. It's clumsier now. Perhaps I should do a little example down here, and I'm going to use a pencil to draw that shape in there that I want. So if I draw the pencil in a bit deeper so you can see it, then you draw your petals in. One side of the petal is from above the line, you go up, over, down, and then over and down. And like so, and that one there. And then the other side, we need to perhaps do it in the other direction. And then they look like they're growing out of something. And then when we put something behind them, that perhaps the lines of these petals are going in a different direction, so they look like they're curling upwards. Then we get that feeling that there's more going on above. Again, I'm just curling them over as if there's it's like there's a ball here, and these are going around the shape of the ball. So if you imagine these shapes here, we put petals where the stripes are, and then this way you've got them going in a different direction. I don't know if that makes any sense, but sometimes seeing what's going on, it makes more sense than otherwise. And so that, from that would look a lot better. It looks more like a chrysanthemum bud, you know, just saying. But you can add, that's quite happy, it can work into that. So I hope that helped, because I was wittering. And of course, we've discovered together, I knew this anyway because I've done this in the past, I just forget about it, is that water-soluble fine liners can be used almost like paints. And you know, if you want the lines to remain but be a bit smudged, put the lines down first. If you want a smoother application of colour, put the water down, then add the colour, and you've got a bit more time to play with it and to move it around. Different colours, though, I have to say, in the Staedtlers have different stickability to the paper, so some are more difficult to move than others. And of course it also depends on how wet or how dry, you know, how damp your brush is. The drier it is, the less you're going to move the colour, the more control you've got about how much you do. But I think it's a nice way of playing with colour and just getting it down. And for travelling, or, you know, sketching in straight, you know, places, it could work quite nicely. Or either fine liners or the thicker version of them, because you get, you know, thicker felt tip pens. Just saying, I prefer that in some ways to having to carry paints around and pots full of Inktense. So I may do that in the future, who knows. And if you lose them, it's not as much of a problem generally as other things. So I'm just going to say thank you for joining me here this morning, and I do hope that you've enjoyed this little exploration today and that you'll have a go. But no matter what, look after yourselves, take care, and above all else, find time to be creative. Bye-bye for now. Bye.